We are still waiting for complete results from Georgia's primary election after a long day yesterday, a meltdown at some of the polls and frustration among voters. We heard from so many people who had very discouraging attempts to try to vote. 3 counties are still counting votes as we speak, including Fulton County. The process really slowed down by a record number of voters who were voting by absentee ballot.
One of the biggest contests that we're following for you is that Democratic race for the U.S. Senate. John Ossoff has a clear lead with 97% of precincts reporting he is coming very close to avoiding a runoff, but we're still waiting for those complete results to make that call. Our Doug Richards has more on this race, which will decide who runs against Republican incumbent David Perdue in November.
Like most political candidates, John Ossoff's personal appearances all but disappeared in March, shortly after the former congressional candidate qualified to run for the U.S. Senate at the state capitol. But because Ossoff was the Democratic face of the most expensive congressional race in human history in 2017, when he narrowly lost a special election in the 6th district, his name recognition endured. He hovered around the 50% mark for much of today. Yet when we talked to him this afternoon, he wanted no part of declaring victory.
I'm really not here to discuss the numbers, the outcomes, who's on top and who's not. And whether folks voted for me or voted for somebody else, I'm going to fight to make sure their votes are counted.
Ossoff says state and local officials need to fix the election system that produced hours-long lines in Fulton County and elsewhere during voting Tuesday. Ossoff faced a spirited but underfunded challenge from former Lieutenant Governor candidate Sarah Riggs-Amico and former Columbus Mayor Teresa Tomlinson. Tomlinson is the second-place finisher and would face Ossoff in a runoff if there is one.
We know this, with $30 million in name recognition, every single Democrat who pulled a ballot knew who he was, and 52% chose someone else. Not because they don't like him, that's not fair, that's not accurate, but because they just don't believe he's ready for the United States Senate.
After Tomlinson spoke with us, Ossoff's lead grew. And tonight the question is whether it's enough for him to set his sights on Republican David Perdue instead of a Democratic runoff.